You're tuned into News Now on KFUG Community Radio 101.1 FM and streaming online at kfugradio.org. This co-production between KFUG, the Wild Rivers Outpost, and Redwood Voice is bringing you the latest happenings right here in Del Norte County. On tonight's stories, the COVID-19 update you've come to expect, how our community is handling it, and where we are now. In other news, the expansion of Redwood Voice through the recent Redwood Voicecast, a podcast to connect with the community at large. And in one of our top stories, a report by our very own Avi Critz examining the meaning of defunding the police, what that means for bigger cities, and what that would mean for a small town like us. All that and more on tonight's News Now. For KFUG Community Radio, I'm Persephone Rose, and I'm joined by Avi Critz. First things first, the COVID-19 update. All news on the COVID situation as it stands right now, like you've come to expect. This information was written and valid as of July 1st, so please be aware of any changes that may have come since then. Upon writing this, there have been a total of 51 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Del Norte County. Currently, there are 3 active cases. 2,528 tests have been administered. Of the 3 active cases, 1 is currently hospitalized, which marks the second COVID-19 related hospitalization in Del Norte County, according to the Information Hub on the Del Norte County Public Health's website. If you would like to further track this information, you can find it and much more at covid19.dnco.org. In regards to the hospitalizations, Public Health Officer Dr. Warren Raywalt explained that the first patient was a middle-aged man, the second an elderly man, and that both are locals. He informed the Wild Rivers Outpost, quote, "We checked out their contacts pretty thoroughly. We're directing people to go in and get testing. They are quarantining, watching and waiting to see what develops." End quote. Meanwhile, hotels and motels were allowed to open at full capacity on Friday. Hotels must maintain 1 unbooked room for every 30 in the hotel to house a guest should they become ill with COVID-19. Family entertainment venues, museums, and galleries can also reopen. According to a revised order from Raywalt, essential government and business entities operating without a plan must have one submitted to the Public Health Branch by Friday. This brings us into a segue about the city budget. Amidst COVID-19 concerns, the Crescent City Council adopted a budget Monday that included several cuts, such as leaving the Fred and Dirt Municipal Pool closed and net deficits in all major funds. Finance Director Linda Lever asked councilors to think of the 2020 to 2021 budget as it stood on Monday as Phase 1. She said that the revenue projections continue to be uncertain, and much depends on how long it takes the economy to recover from the COVID-19 emergency. Lever told councilors to expect updates about every 2 months, with the first coming in July. She said the first proposed budget change will likely come before the council at the second meeting in August, and that the state is also expected to do their first budget amendment in August. After cutting $500,000 to try to heal a $650,000 shortfall the pandemic created for the 2019 to 2020 fiscal year, councilors were left with a 2020 to 2021 budget shortfall of $800,000. According to Lever, the city expects projected revenues of $4.8 million in the general fund for 2020 to 2021 and expenditures of $5.6 million. Included amongst other cuts are the continued pool closure, expenses related to travel and training, the sister city, ordinance updates, equipment replacement, and the implementation of Crescent City Fire and Rescue's master plan. Though employee furloughs aren't included in this Phase 1 budget, that is something that may be discussed in the future if it's needed, Lever said. If there is funding available to pay for these programs and positions, they will be brought back before the City Council for approval on a case-by-case basis. On June 8th, Lever said TOT, Transient Occupancy Tax, revenue is flexible. She said she expects a gradual increase as hotels, vacation rentals, RV parks, and other lodging facilities welcome travelers again. On Monday, Lever told councilors staff will continue to evaluate revenues and provide updates throughout the year. For a deeper look into what this budget entails, including all the numbers, what else is being cut, and some focuses of the budget in far greater detail than we can present in this newscast alone, you can find more information on the Wild Rivers Outpost's extensive article regarding it on their website wildriversoutpost.lostcoastoutpost.com.
If you've been keeping up with the news, you may have heard about an interesting hashtag that has been circulating around most major media stations. Hashtag DefundThePolice has gained more popularity in mainstream media recently in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent Black Lives Matter protests. Now, it's a major conversation everywhere, from news stations to your Facebook feed. But what does hashtag DefundThePolice really mean, and what effects might it have on a rural town like ours? Hashtag DefundThePolice refers to a movement that is focused on encouraging cities to decrease funding to their police departments and instead invest those funds directly into the community to improve the quality of living. This defunding and demilitarization of the police force in America is designed to lower the rates of police brutality, as well as improve the lives of the people most affected by police violence, Black and brown people. Many people have questioned, if the police are defunded, what agencies will take their place when responding to emergency calls from the community? For proponents of defunding the police, much careful thought has gone into who will be able to fill the gaps left by the police force, and they found it in an abundant place: communities. Organizations like MPD 150 and Reclaim the Block are dedicated to the idea of defunding the police and increasing support for community-led safety initiatives. These safety initiatives can take many forms, such as funding supportive housing to lower homelessness, increasing mental health support, and investing in education and restorative justice practices in schools. For many organizations like Reclaim the Block, investing in youth in low-income areas is a vital part of preventing crime and disrupting the school-to-prison pipeline that many young people of color experience. These organizations are also focusing on replacing some aspects of emergency response. When people call for help with an emergency, people will be there to respond, just like now. The differences, however, would be that the people who respond are trained in de-escalation techniques and can provide more assistance with the human services available. For example, if someone calls in that a person is having trouble with drug addiction, healthcare workers or rapid response social workers would respond to the call and de-escalate the situation, then provide the person with resources and get them the help that they need. Currently, police officers can respond to calls about drug addiction, homelessness, or mental health crises without the proper training or understanding of the situation to properly de-escalate it. The idea of replacing this role with professionals who understand the community and the individuals they would work with would hopefully lower the rates of police violence against these certain groups of people. Reinvesting in communities would also allow for more agency in what needs to be done or what needs to change. The community knows best what needs to be done, and with proper funding, can institute establishments that address that need directly. Trusting Black and brown communities is important in this regard. The MPD website describes the possible impacts of these types of changes. Quote, "The people who respond to crises in our community should be the people who are best equipped to deal with those crises. Rather than strangers armed with guns who very likely do not live in the neighborhoods they're patrolling, we want to create space for more mental health service providers, social workers, victim/survivor advocates, religious leaders, neighbors, healers, and friends, all of the people who really make up the fabric of a community, to look out for one another." End quote. Many people have asked the question, what will happen if there is a violent crime? While there is no decisive solution yet, ideas have been put forth such as violence interrupters, who could intervene in potentially violent situations and diffuse it. Many people are speaking to the difficulty of creating new agencies or trying to decide how to proceed from here, but many people agree that no matter how difficult it may seem, the status quo was not working. It will be a long and difficult process, but some cities are already taking steps to implement some of these changes. For example, the City Council of Minneapolis, Minnesota, the city in which George Floyd was murdered by a police officer, has voted to disband their police department earlier this month. Minneapolis City Council members spoke about their plans to announce what public safety would look like going forward and how they will work with the community to establish more community-led public safety strategies. Lawmakers in 16 other major U.S. cities have pledged or proposed large budget cuts to their police forces, including Los Angeles, New York, Seattle, and Chicago. But these are cities with much larger populations than our small rural town in an isolated part of Northern California. What influence could this movement have on neighboring cities with a community that looks similar to our own? For example, the Arcata City Council recently approved their annual budget, in which they cut their police department's budget by around $750,000. This includes freezing 4 vacant positions, 3 overhire positions, candidates for open positions who are still in training, and cuts funding for police equipment, supplies, and training. Brian Ahern, the chief of police for Arcata's police department, also spoke about planned reforms, such as the increase of use for body cameras, removal of the carotid control hold, and the prioritization of de-escalation methods approved by the Peace Officers Standards and Training. Chief Ahern also proposed the return of 14 rifles given to the Arcata Police Department by the Department of Defense. Ahern noted that they do not train with or use the rifles, so he suggested sending them back as a way of addressing reforms to demilitarize the police. But again, Arcata is a city with a larger population than our own. What effect, if any, would the widespread push for police reform have on the law enforcement of our own town? I spoke with Mayor Blake Inscore about our city and local law enforcement and how the calls to defund police departments may not apply to our community.
Well, I guess my first thought, Javi, is that I have to look at it from the vantage point of what law enforcement is here in Del Norte County and in Crescent City. I mean, you can look at this from a philosophical standpoint. You can talk about a movement, but to do so without addressing what does law enforcement represent, what kind of relationship does our community have with law enforcement, I'm just not sure how helpful that is. And I think that that's part of the dilemma of addressing a movement if that movement doesn't have a correlation to the community you live in.
And you mentioned kind of the relationship between police and citizens in other towns, and you mentioned that I think we have a very different, our city has a very different kind of relationship with our law enforcement. Could you
I believe so.
Yeah, could you kind of like describe that relationship between us and our law enforcement here?
I think that what we have seen is we have seen some strong leadership over the last several years that addresses the responsibility of our law enforcement, whether that be the Sheriff's Department, City PD, CHP, where there is this desire to be a part of the community, to address community concerns, to be involved in the things that the community has done. And I just look at our current leaders in those three prominent law enforcement areas. I look at Commander Deepy, I look at Sheriff Apperson, and I look at Chief Griffin. And all three of these men, I believe, genuinely want to do the very best for our community. I think they hold their departments accountable for providing good response to our community. They're also involved in what goes on in our community beyond just enforcing the law. And I think that, as is in most situations, that when you see that kind of leadership at the top, then it filters down through the departments as a whole. And I think that that's indicative of the relationship that the leaders in law enforcement have made in our community, and I think that that's a good thing. Sheriff Apperson, when he was at Crescent City PD, was a big part of being that face in our community and being an example to other officers to do that, to be available, to be accessible.
In addition to local law enforcement being actively involved within our community, I noticed a difference between our police forces and those in larger, more metropolitan cities. Our police officers actually live in the neighborhoods that they're policing. This was a point from MPD 150's website that they noted they want to change about their own communities and the people who police them. However, one of the luxuries of living in a small town like ours is getting to know everyone, including police officers. And there is not as much othering between law enforcement and citizens that we may see in larger cities. Mayor Inscore noted this possible difference as well.
They live here, and that's why that is part of what makes it different. And that's not to say that there's never problems, right? Mm-hmm. There's problems. You're going to have problems no matter where you live. You're going to have problems in any size of community. I just believe that what you just mentioned is a key component of why maybe things are different here than they might be in a more metropolitan area, is that these people all live here. It's just different. And maybe some of the actions that are being taken in larger cities are absolutely appropriate, but I don't live there and I don't know what their budgets look like. Mm-hmm. But I do know what ours looks like.
This led me to ask how the city's budget was structured in regards to the police department. I also asked about mental health services and the Defund the Police movement's push to replace some aspects of police response with mental health professionals and social workers.
I guess my thought is the Health and Human Services has a budget of around $20 million to provide those kind of services and programs. Crescent City's general fund budget is $5 million. Crescent City's police department is funded at about $1 million a year. My point is that $20 million is already invested in providing those kind of services, especially in the area of mental health and social services. And so there's a huge investment already in Delaware County to try to provide those services. Do you take something away from the Crescent City Police Department, which has $1 million budget, when you already have that investment? Talking about housing, the Housing Authority in Crescent City subsidizes over $3 million worth of housing subsidies in Delaware County. I mean, when you start thinking about how much money that is, and we're talking about nearly 600 families who are housing units that are part of the housing program, $3 million already being invested in our community. I guess I look at it, Avi, as some of those things are already happening here and have been happening here for quite some time. Can we do a better job? Absolutely. We can always do a better job. But to reallocate funding for a department that's really just, it's not an exorbitant budget. It's a efficiency budget to provide the kind of services that our community has come to expect from the Crescent City Police Department.
I wanted to ask Mayor Inscore if these services include responding to mental health crisis calls, as many people call the police if they feel it might become dangerous for the mentally ill individual or others. As we have seen over the past few years in larger cities, police officers have arrived at these situations and not known the proper way to de-escalate them, often causing more harm. I brought up this issue to Mayor Inscore, who had this to say.
That is one of my biggest concerns. There are two things that always concern me when it comes to law enforcement from the city standpoint. Number one, being able to recruit and keep qualified officers. And then secondly, being able to provide them the resources necessary to do their job. And some of that is equipment, obviously. You know, it's making sure that what they have works, but also the resources to do their job, to me, is providing them access to the training that will help them be the very best officer that they can be. I believe that we have strong working relationships between our three primary law enforcement arms here, CHP, the Sheriff's Department, and Crescent City PD, with Health and Human Services, to make those connections early on.
One of the largest platforms of the hashtag DefundThePolice movement is to replace police officer response with social workers or mental health professionals who are able to de-escalate a situation and provide services. I asked Mayor Inscore if this was a possibility in our community and in what ways we could improve mental health services in relation to law enforcement.
I don't know that we have the staffing at Health and Human Services to have those people on the front line. That's goes back to part of the training, and maybe that training is being able to have police officers, sheriff's deputies, being able to evaluate a situation and know this is a mental health situation, and we need to make this call to maybe it's a mental health crisis line that's staffed, so that before a situation escalates, they already have that person on the line that is giving them some insight. But I know that the only way stuff like that works is when you're building good, strong interagency relationships, so that there's not a territorial aspect to it, so that it's about providing services to the community as a whole. That's the training piece. That's the collaboration piece. That's where we need to be working together. I believe that's already happening, but I think that the more we learn to work together in those kind of dynamics, the better we're going to be able to serve this community as a whole.
Police defunding and reform is in no way an easy task, and as we've learned, not always applicable to every single community. However, the main theme that strings through these issues is a focus on community and involvement. Law enforcement, or community-based safety initiatives, need to be aware of the issues truly facing each community and be a part of the solution. They need to be willing to listen to the members of that community about what is and isn't working. This includes creating strong connections between agencies that focus on human services, or even creating frontline responders who are well equipped to deal with mental illness or drug addiction. When police officers lose touch with the communities that they swear to protect, that distance can become dangerous. Advocate for your community, for positive change, and for more connections between those who want to help. Stay safe, and Black Lives Matter.
And now, a press release from the Yurok tribe. The Yurok Tribal Council recently appointed Angie Brown as the COVID-19 Incident Command Team's public health officer. Brown brings more than 25 years of local public health experience to the Incident Command Team. She will be overseeing the Yurok Public Health Task Force, which is responsible for developing and implementing plans to prevent the spread of COVID-19 on the Yurok Reservation. The veteran healthcare professional will also provide medical oversight on the enforcement of the tribe's public health ordinance and other related regulations. Joseph L. James, the chairman of the Yurok tribe, said, quote, "We are very grateful to have Miss Brown on our team. She is going to play a pivotal role during the next phase of this ever-evolving emergency." End quote. Serene Hayden, the Yurok tribe's incident commander, added, quote, "Miss Brown has the perfect background for this position. She's incredibly informed about infectious disease control and is equally knowledgeable regarding public health in our community." End quote. Brown is the credentialed school nurse for the Klamath Trinity Joint Unified School District and leads the organization's response to the COVID-19 emergency. She has a comprehensive understanding of what local tribe entities, counties, and the state are doing to confront this unprecedented crisis. Brown has also served as a public health nurse for the Humboldt County Department of Health and Human Services, where she was involved in communicable disease control and prevention. Becoming a certified public health nurse in 1995, she has worked for both state and tribal agencies in Humboldt County. Brown said, quote, "I have spent my entire career cultivating a professional skill set to address complex health issues in our community. I am excited to help the community in this new capacity, and I'm looking forward to building upon all of the great work that has been accomplished to date and continuing in an effort to create community wellness and prevention through a culturally sensitive, holistic, and trauma-informed resiliency approach." End quote. There have been 0 confirmed COVID-19 cases on the Yurok Reservation. The flat infection rate speaks to the success of the tribe's rapid and sustained response to this far-reaching crisis. On March 13th, the Yurok Tribal Council issued an emergency declaration, mobilizing more than 100 staff members to confront the many facets of the unparalleled public health emergency. On April 6th, the tribe closed the reservation to visitors and instituted a curfew. For more than 2 months, the tribe has been delivering food and supply boxes on a weekly basis to approximately 500 elders. The council has provided $1,250 to tribal citizens who are facing financial challenges because of the pandemic and are over the age of 18 by December 30th, 2020. The council also set aside $2 million in CARES funding to help tribal business owners and entrepreneurs recover from the COVID-19 recession. Additionally, the Tribal Council recently issued an order requiring reservation residents to wear face coverings while in public. Rod Mendez, the Yurok Incident Management Team's deputy commander, concluded, quote, "This is not the time to let our guard down. We are 100% vigilant in terms of protecting the most vulnerable community members. We are headed in the right direction, but we are not out of the woods yet." End quote. If you are a tribal citizen in need of assistance, please call 1-888-225-8952. End of press release. And now, a segment from our station manager, Paul Critz.
The Del Norte Healthcare District's latest letter to Governor Gavin Newsom asking him to halt the transfer of inmates into Pelican Bay State Prison may actually be getting the attention of the governor's office this time around. In the letter, the third such missive directed to Governor Newsom, the district stressed its continuing concern that importing inmates sick with COVID-19 into Del Norte County could potentially prove disastrous should a surge emerge at the prison. In recent weeks, COVID infections have exploded in California's prison system, spurred by interfacility transfers designed to alleviate the stress on coronavirus hotspots, such as the California Institute for Men in Chino, which has seen hundreds of infections and 9 deaths. Late in May, 121 prisoners were moved from Chino to San Quentin in the Bay Area. Within days, COVID-19 began showing up in San Quentin's population, and as of this newscast, more than 1,000 inmates, slightly more than a quarter of the total prison population, are ill. KFUG Community News and the Wild Rivers Outpost spoke today by phone with Dr. Kevin Caldwell, local family practitioner and chair of the Del Norte Healthcare District Board, about the district's attempt to secure Pelican Bay from COVID and why this is important for Del Norte County.
Some significant new developments just as of this morning that involve both of you in a good way. But it highlights the frustration we have had for the last 3 months trying to get some traction on this concept of securing the prison. And the trouble we've had with trying to get our public health officer to support us and to do something about it. And for that sake, other community leadership, like the county supervisors who oversee the public health officer, are just not getting on board to do what we think should be done, that this prison poses a huge threat to our community, and if we don't secure it both in terms of stopping prisoner transfers into the prison, but also educating the staff who are coming in and out of the prison, the potential for disaster in this community is enormous. And now we're seeing similar things playing out in other communities because of their prisons. So we first, back in March, again with a lot of coercion, got the public health officer to go along with a letter to the governor. Don't know whatever happened to that. Never got a response. Then by April meeting, then we said, well, look, they had said that they stopped the transfers, but they didn't. And then, so we pushed him to file an actual order. Like as public health officer, he can file an actual order. And he kept pushing back. He really didn't want to do it, and finally agreed that if we write it, which is no insignificant task to write it, and luckily we've got the expertise on our healthcare district board now that we could do it, so that if we wrote it, he would look at it. So we'd already been there, so we got it to him within 24 hours, and then he disappeared and would not return emails, phone calls, text messages. And so a week went by, and finally basically ordered him, like, respond. And he said no, he wasn't going to do the order, and he sent another letter to the governor and hadn't had a response, but he'd get back to it. And a lot of the reasoning was, well, they don't have to follow it because of the pecking order. And our response was, well, you do the right thing. And if the state wants to do the wrong thing, let them do it and declare themselves. But why don't you just do the right thing to protect this community? But still no luck. And then came the next week, May 12th, at that supervisor meeting about he wanted to import virus. And after that, everything blew up, and this whole prison thing went to the wayside. And so after that, and then we had our May meeting with him, and he clearly was not having any bit of it. He was not going to participate with us. He defended that decision. And that meeting was over, and then just the healthcare district, we were deciding, well, do we just give up and quit, or do we still do what we think is the right thing to protect this community and try again and try another letter and try to get the county and the city involved and get some other voices involved to get to Sacramento so that we can get this prison secured. So that's what precipitated the letter last week.
Yesterday, an article outlining the healthcare district's attempts and frustrations regarding inmate transfers in Pelican Bay appeared in the Wild Rivers Outpost, and it seems that someone from the State Office of Emergency Services read it.
This morning, I was in my office, and my staff interrupted me, and they said, "There's somebody from the governor's office on the phone." And so I went and got it right away, and it was this a guy from the governor's office in Eureka. Didn't even know such a thing existed, but he was from the governor's office in Eureka, and he was very interested in this letter from last week, and he was very interested in stopping transfers and protecting Del Norte. He was like reiterating to me how important it was. And I'm like, yeah, I'm with you on this. But the part you like, he didn't get notified like from the governor's office in Sacramento. He became aware of our letter because of Jessica's article yesterday in the Wild Rivers Outpost. He said apparently somebody posted it on social media and he just happened to read it. I mean, I think it quite literally means if it wasn't for KFUG and Wild Rivers Outpost, this would have never come to light.
The person on the phone with Dr. Caldwell this morning was Edwin Warford, Regional Emergency Services Coordinator for the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. KFUG and the Outpost both reached out to Mr. Warford for comment, but were referred to the Public Information Team at Cal OES for more info. Subsequent emails had not been responded to by airtime, but we'd only given them like an hour, so no harm, no foul. Keep an eye on the Wild Rivers Outpost for more on this story as it develops.
And so he was very animated about doing something, and he's already said he's put in emails to his superiors and trying to figure out what's going on. And it's like literally he'd only had the official letter for like an hour or so, and said that, yeah, he's going to be on it. He's getting to all the right people and that he'll get back to me.
Does all this mean that the Del Norte Healthcare District's efforts to stop prisoner transfers into Pelican Bay will pay off? Time will tell, but for now, Dr. Caldwell is hopeful.
Yes, this morning after that phone call, I've been more optimistic than I've been in a long time. So it's very hopeful, but it would be something to now. Let's keep pursuing it and make sure it really turns into something.
For KFUG Community News, I'm Paul Critz.
Redwood Voice is bringing out an entirely new means to connect and work with the community in the form of a new podcast simply titled The Redwood Voicecast. The Redwood Voicecast aims to connect its team, the very people you're listening to right now, to the community at large. Coincidentally, it will also likely be on a bi-weekly, that's once every 2 weeks, not twice in 1 week, FYI, uploading schedule online to the Redwood Voice YouTube channel. The hope behind this new project is to streamline information and communication. In one sense, it allows a more human approach to discussion of the community, in which you can see your regular reporters just a bit more as people. Rather than reading copy, we will be earnestly discussing the operations of Redwood Voice, operations that we would like to get you, the community member, the listener, involved with. But of course, if you would like a more apt explanation and feel of the Voicecast, we recommend listening to it for yourself on the Redwood Voice YouTube channel. For more information on Redwood Voice, you can check out our website, redwoodvoice.org, or our Facebook page, facebook.com/redwoodvoice.dnatl.
More than 660 families have responded to a new school district survey on the learning model they think would be right for their child when they return to school in the fall. Noting that Norte Unified School District and others statewide were shooting at a moving target on the back of a speeding train that's zigzagging across a mountainous landscape, Superintendent Jeff Harris said input from parents as well as teachers will be used to develop a learning plan for a 2020 to 2021 school year, likely still defined by COVID-19. DNUSD deployed the survey on Wednesday, and it will be available to parents through July 3rd. According to Harris, California's Superintendent of Public Instruction and the State Board of Education is required by law to develop a template for the 2020 to 2021 school year by August 1st. DNUSD will likely be trained on that template in mid-August, and the Board of Trustees will need to hold a public hearing before adopting it, Harris said. DNUSD must then submit the learning template to the California Department of Education by the end of September. Del Norte students are scheduled to resume classes the last week of August. DNUSD's last survey presents parents and teachers with two proposed learning models. In the first, about half of its students would attend classes with the teacher in the morning, and the other half would come to school in the afternoon. According to Harris, this model would give teachers about an hour and a half in between to prepare lessons and sanitize rooms for the next group of students. Harris said, quote, "The upside is kids can see their teacher every day, and teachers can establish those relationships. They know who to help and how to help. If a child attends in the morning, in the afternoon they could go to small groups for English learning development, special education, reading intervention, math intervention, or Title VI support, whatever that might look like." However, Harris said the downside is DNUSD school buses may only be able to accommodate about a third of the students they had previously driven. Buses will also only be available to make one run a day. Harris said, quote, "This means, instead of the normal 750 students buses take to and from campuses, it could only accommodate around 250. The second model DNUSD is asking parents and teachers to weigh in on involves students going to school for 2 full days a week and engaging in distance learning for the remaining 3 days, Harris said. Students would be able to engage in longer sessions as well as meet with counselors and other supports. The 3 days of distance learning gives teachers, custodial, and other staff the ability to plan and prepare. It could also save the district some much-needed money, according to Harris. Harris said that out of the 668 parents that have already responded, 55% favored the AM/PM model, even though they understood that buses may not run. About 75% indicated that transportation wouldn't be a problem. However, District 2 trustee Angela Grino said she's heard from parents who were concerned about how distance learning would work, even if students were in a classroom for part of the time. She noted that when schools closed on March 16th due to the pandemic, many families were struggling to get online, and for some, learning was a worksheet. Her colleague, Douglas MacArthur, who represents Del Norte County District 1 on the Board of Trustees, said he's concerned about the digital divide. Harris said, based on some of the initial surveys DNUSD conducted, staff estimated that between 10 to 15% of its students, roughly 400 to 600, didn't have internet access. Marcus Endert, a special education resource teacher, said that while the district is trying to differentiate between crisis learning and distance learning, the community is still in crisis. Endert also cautioned against the district and the Board of Trustees thinking of distance learning as a new normal. Endert said, quote, "On the survey I saw, there was a question, how long would you be willing to participate in this distance learning? There was an option of 1 year, 2 or more years, and there was a third option of, I don't know. There was no option for, we hate this altogether and we just want to be with our kids," end quote. If you would like to participate in this survey, it can be found on the DNUSD Facebook page and will remain open for submissions until July 3rd.
Thanks again for tuning into News Now. To hear more episodes of our newscast, check out kfugradio.org or our YouTube channel. Special thanks to Wild Rivers Outpost and Jessica Sanar, Crescent City Bureau Chief, for providing great content. Tune in 2 weeks from now to KFUG Community Radio 101.1 FM or stream on kfugradio.org online to hear more news from your favorite local radio station. This newscast was edited by Persephone Rose. The voices of this newscast were Persephone Rose and Avi Critz.